when a simple waitress at Tony's diner stepped between a bullying teenager and a quiet boy with Down syndrome. She had no idea she was protecting the most precious thing in the life of Chicago's most feared crime boss. What happened next would change everything she thought she knew about justice, loyalty, and the unexpected places where love can be found. The fluorescent lights of Tony's diner buzzed overhead as Sarah Martinez wiped down the worn Formica counter for the third time that evening. The smell of grease and fresh coffee filled the air, mixing with the sounds of sizzling bacon from the kitchen. Outside, the Chicago wind rattled the windows, carrying the first hints of autumn through the busy streets of Little Italy. It was 3:47 p.m. when trouble walked through the door. Brad Henderson, a 17-year-old with perfectly styled hair and an attitude that screamed privilege, strutted into the diner with two of his friends from Lincoln Park High. Sarah had seen his type before: kids who thought their parents' money gave them the right to treat everyone else like dirt. "Look what we have here," Brad announced loudly, his voice cutting through the afternoon calm. "It's the dummy from our school." Sarah's attention snapped to the corner booth where a gentle-faced boy sat quietly, carefully coloring in a book with intense concentration. Michael was maybe 16, with soft brown eyes and the distinctive features that marked him as having Down syndrome. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday after school, always ordering the same thing: chocolate milk and apple pie. Before she could continue, she noticed the fear creeping into Michael's expression as Brad approached his table. "Hey, retard," Brad said, leaning over the booth. "What's with the baby coloring book? Aren't you a little old for that?" Michael's hands trembled slightly as he looked up. "Please, I'm not bothering anyone." "You're bothering me just by existing," Brad laughed, grabbing the coloring book. "Maybe I should help you with this. You're not even staying in the lines." That's when Sarah moved. She'd grown up in Pilsen, the daughter of a single mother who cleaned office buildings at night to make ends meet. She knew what it felt like to be powerless, to be picked on for things you couldn't control. But she also knew that sometimes someone had to stand up. "That's enough," Sarah said firmly, positioning herself between Brad and Michael. Her heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. "Leave him alone." Brad straightened up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, what? The waitress wants to play hero." "Mind your own business, lady." "This is my business," Sarah replied, extending her hand toward Michael. "Michael, come sit at the counter. Your pie's ready anyway." "Did I stutter?" Brad's voice grew louder, drawing stares from the other customers. "I said mind your own." "You heard the lady." The voice came from behind them, deep and commanding, with just a hint of an Italian accent. Sarah turned to see a man in his mid-50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than she made in 3 months. His salt-and-pepper hair was perfectly styled, and his dark eyes held an intensity that made Brad immediately step back. "Dad?" Michael's face lit up with pure joy and relief. The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Dad. This man, clearly someone important, someone powerful, was Michael's father. Vincent Torino moved past Sarah with fluid grace, his presence commanding the entire diner. Every conversation stopped. Even the cook peered out from the kitchen window. "Michael," Vincent said softly, his entire demeanor changing as he looked at his son. "Are you all right?" "I'm okay now, Dad. Sarah was helping me." Vincent's eyes found Sarah's, and for a moment she saw something unexpected in them, gratitude mixed with something deeper, something vulnerable. Was she now? Vincent turned his attention to Brad, who had gone pale. "And what exactly did my son need help with?" Brad opened his mouth, then closed it, suddenly understanding that he'd made a terrible mistake. The afternoon air in Tony's diner had never felt quite this electric. The silence stretched like a taut wire through Tony's diner. Sarah watched as Vincent Torino, a name she now realized she should probably recognize, studied Brad with the patience of a predator. The teenager's earlier bravado had evaporated completely, replaced by the kind of terror that comes from suddenly understanding you've wandered into the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. "I asked you a question," Vincent said quietly, his tone conversational, but carrying an undertone that made Sarah's skin prickle. What did my son need help with? Brad's friends had already started backing toward the door, their survival instincts sharper than their loyalty. But Brad stood frozen, caught between his pride and his growing fear. It was just a misunderstanding, sir," Brad stammered. "A misunderstanding." Vincent nodded thoughtfully, then looked at Michael. "Son, can you tell me what happened?" Michael fidgeted with his coloring book, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. "He called me names, Dad, and he took my book." But Sarah stopped him. Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but when he spoke to Michael, his voice remained gentle. "Names? What kind of names?" "I don't want to repeat them," Michael said quietly. "They weren't nice." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah found herself holding her breath, acutely aware that she was witnessing something significant, not just a father protecting his child, but something that would have consequences far beyond this moment. Vincent walked over to Brad with measured steps. The boy was sweating now, despite the autumn chills seeping through the diner's windows. "Let me explain something to you," Vincent said, his voice so low that Sarah had to strain to hear it. "That boy you were tormenting, he's worth more than you could ever understand. He sees the world with a kindness that people like you will never possess. He trusts everyone until they give him a reason not to. And he's my son." Brad nodded frantically, but Vincent wasn't finished. "Now you're going to apologize to him, not because I'm telling you to, but because it's the right thing to do. And then you're going to leave, and you're never going to bother him again. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir, absolutely clear." Brad approached Michael's booth on shaking legs. "I'm sorry, Michael, really sorry. I was being stupid and mean, and you didn't deserve that." Michael looked up with those trusting brown eyes that his father had mentioned. "It's okay, thank you for apologizing." The simple grace of the response seemed to affect everyone in the diner, including Brad, who looked genuinely ashamed for the first time. After Brad and his friends hurried out, Vincent turned his attention to Sarah. She expected anger, maybe suspicion about her motives, but instead found something she hadn't anticipated: respect. "Miss Martinez. Sarah Martinez. Miss Martinez, walk with me." It wasn't a request. Sarah glanced at her manager, Tony Benedetto, who nodded quickly. Clearly he knew exactly who Vincent Torino was. The older Italian man behind the grill gave her an encouraging nod. They stepped outside into the crisp Chicago afternoon. The street buzzed with its usual activity: construction workers grabbing late lunches, office workers hurrying between appointments, students from the nearby community college clustered around bus stops. "You didn't hesitate," Vincent observed, lighting a cigarette with hands that Sarah noticed were both elegant and scarred. "When you saw my son being hurt, you didn't think about your own safety or your job. You just acted. Anyone would have done the same thing." Vincent's laugh was dry. "No, Miss Martinez, most people would have looked the other way, especially if they knew who I was." "And who exactly are you?" The question hung between them. Vincent studied her face, as if trying to determine whether her ignorance was genuine. "Let's just say I'm a businessman with strong opinions about family and loyalty." Sarah sensed there was much more to the story, but something in Vincent's eyes warned her not to push. "Michael comes here twice a week," she said instead. "He's always polite, always tips exactly 15%, and he colors while he eats. He never bothers anyone." "He's been coming here for 6 months, Vincent replied. "This is the first time I've had to intervene personally." "How did you know to come today?" Vincent gestured toward a black sedan parked across the street. Sarah could just make out the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat. "Michael is never alone, Miss Martinez, even when it looks like he is." The implications of that statement settled over her like a heavy blanket. The black sedan's presence suddenly made the bustling Chicago street feel different to Sarah, as if she was seeing it through a new lens. Every person walking by could be watching, every car could be significant. She'd lived in this neighborhood her entire life, but now it felt like foreign territory. You're scared, Vincent observed, dropping his cigarette and crushing it under a polished Italian leather shoe. Should I be? Instead of answering directly, Vincent gestured toward the diner's window. Inside, Michael had returned to his coloring, completely absorbed in his work, the earlier incident seemingly forgotten. The afternoon light streaming through the glass caught the concentration on his face, and for a moment he looked younger than his 16 years. My son has a rare gift, Vincent said quietly. He sees people as they really are, not as they pretend to be. No pretense, no hidden agendas, pure honesty. In my world, Miss Martinez, that kind of innocence is more precious than gold. Your world. Vincent turned to face her fully. You really don't know, do you? Sarah shook her head, though something in her gut was beginning to piece together clues she'd been unconsciously collecting. The deference in Tony's eyes, the way conversations had stopped when Vincent entered, the careful way he spoke about business. My name is Vincent Torino. I run certain operations in this part of Chicago, import and export, you might say, along with other ventures. The weight of the revelation hit her immediately. She'd heard whispers about the Torino family in the neighborhood, stories passed down from her grandmother about the old country, ways that still influenced certain aspects of life in Little Italy. But she'd always assumed they were just stories. You're telling me I'm telling you that I'm a father first, Vincent interrupted. Everything else is secondary to that. A gust of wind sent fallen leaves swirling around their feet. Sarah watched as Vincent's expression softened whenever his gaze fell on Michael through the window. When Michael was born, Vincent continued, the doctors told us he would never live independently, never have real friendships, never understand the complexities of the world. They were wrong about some things and right about others. He doesn't understand cruelty or deception. He takes people at face value. In my line of work, that makes him vulnerable. So you have him followed. I have him protected. There's a difference. Sarah thought about the implications. What happens to people who hurt him? Vincent's silence was answer enough, but you didn't hurt Brad. Brad is 17 years old and stupid. Stupid can be educated. Cruel, Vincent shrugged. Cruel is different. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Michael through the window. He'd finished his pie and was now carefully arranging his colored pencils by height, a small ritual that seemed to bring him satisfaction. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked. Because you protected my son without knowing who he was or who I am. Because you stood up to someone bigger than you for someone you barely knew. That tells me something about your character. It tells you I have a big mouth and poor judgment. Vincent's laugh was genuine this time, transforming his entire face. Maybe. Or maybe it tells me you're exactly the kind of person Michael needs in his life. What do you mean? Michael has his routines, his safe places. This diner is one of them. But he doesn't have friends his own age, people who see past his disability. Today, you showed him that not everyone in the world is like his father's associates or Brad Henderson. Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. Mr. Torino, I'm just a waitress. I work double shifts most days just to pay rent on a studio apartment in Pilsen. I'm not exactly friend material for someone in your situation. My situation. You know what I mean. The money, the power, she gestured vaguely, protection detail. Vincent studied her for a long moment. Miss Martinez, do you know what Michael's favorite part of coming here is? The apple pie. It's that you remember his order. Every time, and you always ask him about his drawings. Last week, he spent 20 minutes telling me about how you admired his picture of a sunset. The memory came back to her Michael's proud smile when she'd complimented his use of orange and red, the way he'd carefully torn the page out of his book and given it to her. She'd taped it to her locker in the break room. He talks about you at home, Vincent continued. He calls you his friend Sarah. Do you understand how rare that is? Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. Mr. Torino. Vincent. Vincent, I don't know what you're asking me. I'm not asking anything. I'm telling you that you've already given my son something I couldn't. The experience of being treated like any other kid walking into a diner. That's worth more to me than you could possibly understand. The wind picked up again, and Sarah pulled her thin cardigan tighter around herself. Vincent noticed the gesture. You're cold. Let's go back inside. As they walked toward the diner's entrance, Sarah felt the weight of everything that had changed in the span of one afternoon. Back inside Tony's diner, the afternoon crowd was beginning to thin out. Sarah noticed that several customers kept glancing their way, their curiosity barely concealed. Word traveled fast in neighborhoods like this, and Vincent Torino's public appearance was clearly big news. Michael looked up as they approached his booth, his face brightening immediately. "Dad, did you see my new drawing? It's the lake in autumn." Vincent slid into the booth across from his son, his massive frame somehow fitting naturally into the cramped space. Sarah marveled at the transformation, the intimidating businessman replaced entirely by a devoted father examining his child's artwork with genuine interest. "The colors are beautiful, Michael. You captured the way the leaves reflect on the water perfectly. Sarah taught me about blending. She said if you press lighter with the pencil, you can make different shades." Vincent's eyes found Sarah's over Michael's bent head. "Is that so?" Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I took some art classes in high school, nothing fancy." "Sarah's really good at drawing," Michael continued enthusiastically. "She showed me how to make clouds look fluffy instead of like cotton balls." "Perhaps you could show me sometime," Vincent said to Sarah, and she couldn't tell if it was a genuine request or polite conversation. Tony Benedetto approached their table, his weathered hands nervously adjusting his apron. "Mr. Torino, is everything all right? Can I get you anything?" "Coffee would be fine, Tony." "Black." "Right away, sir." As Tony hurried away, Vincent turned back to Sarah. "How long have you worked here?" 2 years. I'm saving money for nursing school." "Nursing?" Michael perked up. "Like the nice ladies at my doctor's office." "Exactly like that." "That's so cool. You'd be really good at that because you're kind to people." The simple observation, delivered with Michael's characteristic honesty, seemed to affect Vincent deeply. Sarah watched as something shifted in his expression, a calculation being made, a decision forming. "Miss Martinez," Vincent said carefully, "would you be interested in a different kind of opportunity?" Sarah felt her stomach clench. "What kind of opportunity?" Michael's been asking about getting a part-time job, something that would help him feel more independent while still being safe. Tony's mentioned he could use extra help in the evenings, especially someone who could. Vincent paused, choosing his words carefully, keep an eye on things. Tony, who had been approaching with Vincent's coffee, nearly dropped the cup. "Oh, absolutely, Mr. Torino. Sarah's one of our best, and Michael's always welcome here." "I don't understand," Sarah said. Vincent accepted his coffee and took a careful sip before responding. "Michael wants to work, but he needs someone he trusts nearby, someone who understands him. The pay would be substantial for both positions." The offer hung in the air between them. Sarah understood immediately that this wasn't really about Michael wanting a job. This was Vincent's way of ensuring his son had a protector, someone who had already proven they would stand up for him. "How substantial?" she asked, then immediately felt embarrassed for being so direct. Vincent's smile suggested he appreciated her honesty, enough to cover nursing school, with some left over. Sarah's breath caught. "Mr. Torino." "Vincent, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, it's employment." Michael would have duties helping with simple tasks, maybe greeting customers. You would have duties too, training him, supervising, ensuring his safety. Both positions come with appropriate compensation. Michael was following the conversation with growing excitement. "Sarah, we could work together. I could learn to take orders and carry plates." "Michael," Vincent said gently, "remember we talked about this being Sarah's choice." "Right." "Sorry," Michael turned to Sarah with hopeful eyes, "but it would be really fun if you wanted to." Sarah looked around the diner, at Tony, who was nodding encouragingly. at the other customers who were still stealing glances at their table, at the life she'd built for herself in this small corner of Chicago. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Then she looked at Michael, whose face held such genuine excitement and trust, and at Vincent, whose dark eyes revealed depths of love and worry that she was only beginning to understand. "What exactly would my responsibilities be?" she asked. "Being Michael's friend," Vincent said simply. "Everything else we can figure out as we go." "Dad," Michael spoke up quietly, "can I tell Sarah about the surprise?" Vincent hesitated for just a moment. "If you want to." Michael turned to Sarah with barely contained excitement. "We're opening a community center. Dad bought the old warehouse on Taylor Street, and we're going to fix it up with art rooms and a kitchen for cooking classes and everything. Dad says maybe you could help design the art program because you're so good at teaching drawing." Sarah stared at Vincent, who suddenly looked uncomfortable under her scrutiny. "A community center. The neighborhood could use one," Vincent said tersely. "Kids need safe places to go after school. And this has nothing to do with making sure Michael has a safe place to spend time." "Everything I do has something to do with Michael," Vincent admitted. "But that doesn't make it less necessary." Sarah realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, a man who wielded considerable power, using it not for personal gain, but to create something good for his child and his community. "When do I start?" she heard herself saying. Michael's whoop of joy echoed through the diner, drawing smiles from everyone present. Even Vincent's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly, revealing relief and gratitude. As the afternoon light began to fade outside Tony's diner, Sarah understood that her life had just taken a turn she never could have anticipated. 3 months later, the November wind whipped through Chicago's streets as Sarah unlocked the door to the Taylor Street Community Center. The former warehouse had been transformed into something beautiful: art studios flooded with natural light, a commercial kitchen for cooking classes, and a library corner where Michael spent most of his time when he wasn't helping with daily operations. "Sarah," Michael's voice echoed through the space as he emerged from the kitchen, wearing the official center apron that made him beam with pride. "Mrs. Patterson said my cookies are getting really good." "That's because you've been practicing," Sarah replied, hanging up her coat. The center had been open for 6 weeks now, and Michael had thrown himself into learning every aspect of its operation with infectious enthusiasm. "Dad's in the office," Michael said, then lowered his voice conspiratorially. "He's been smiling a lot lately. I think it's because more kids are coming to the art classes." Sarah made her way to the office, where she found Vincent reviewing enrollment numbers. The serious businessman she'd met at the diner had softened considerably over the past months, though she suspected that change was visible only to a select few. "Afternoon," he said without looking up. "How were the morning classes?" "Full. We had a waiting list for the first time." Vincent's smile was subtle but genuine. "Good. Michael's been asking if we can add evening sessions for teenagers. He wants to help with those too. Says older kids need art therapy just as much as younger ones." Sarah sat down across from his desk, marveling at how natural this had all become. The work was challenging but rewarding, and Vincent had been true to his word about compensation. Her nursing school tuition was paid in full, and she'd been able to move into a 1-bedroom apartment only 6 blocks from the center. "Vincent, can I ask you something?" "Always." "The day we met at the diner, you could have handled Brad differently. Why didn't you?" Vincent set down his papers and leaned back in his chair. "Because Michael was watching. And because you showed me a different way." "I showed you." "You stood up for someone without violence, without threats, just with conviction." Michael saw that. He learned that sometimes protection doesn't require intimidation. The office door burst open as Michael rushed in, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad, Sarah, come see what happened." They followed him to the main activity room, where a group of teenagers had gathered around one of the art tables. At the center of the group was Brad Henderson, the same boy who had tormented Michael months earlier. Sarah felt Vincent tense beside her, but Michael was already approaching the group with his characteristic openness. "Hi, Brad," Michael said cheerfully. "Are you here for art class?" Brad looked uncomfortable, but not unkind. "Yeah, my counselor thought it might help with anger management." "Art is really good for feelings," Michael said seriously. "Sarah taught me that. Did you know you can paint anger? It looks like red scribbles, but then you can paint calm over it with blue." One of the other teenagers, a girl with multiple piercings and a skeptical expression, snorted. "That's actually kind of deep, kid." "Michael's our assistant art instructor," Sarah said, stepping forward. "He's excellent at helping people find the right colors for their emotions." Brad's eyes met Sarah's, and she saw genuine remorse there. I wanted to apologize again for what I did at the diner." "You already apologized," Michael said matter-of-factly. "Are you ready to make art now?" The simple acceptance in Michael's voice seemed to affect everyone in the room. Brad nodded, taking a seat at the table, and the other teenagers made space for him naturally. As Sarah began setting up supplies, she felt Vincent's presence behind her. "He forgives too easily," Vincent murmured, watching his son demonstrate brush techniques to Brad. "Maybe that's exactly what the world needs more of," Sarah replied. Over the next hour, Sarah watched something beautiful unfold. Michael worked with each teenager individually, his genuine enthusiasm and lack of judgment creating a safe space for them to express themselves. Brad, who had initially seemed tense and defensive, gradually relaxed as he worked on a landscape painting. Michael, the pierced girl who'd introduced herself as Luna, said as they cleaned up, "You're like, genuinely cool, not fake cool, real cool." "Thank you, Luna. Your painting of the storm clouds was really powerful." "You're a good artist. Nobody's ever told me that before." "Then they weren't paying attention," Michael said simply. After the teenagers left, promising to return the following week, Sarah found herself alone with Vincent in the now quiet center. Michael had gone home with his evening caregiver, chattering excitedly about planning next week's lesson. "This place has become everything you hoped it would be," Sarah observed. "It's become more than I hoped," Vincent corrected. "I thought I was creating a safe